Okay, so we are back at it, and by the time you see this, Matt will have already traveled and played in the U.S. Open, but in the meantime, I wanted to give him some ideas and see if he can't use this to good effectiveness in the tournament. And we're going to be doing a video on the Chebanenko Slav, and I've seen a lot of things on the Chebanenko, and recently a course was put out on Chessable on the Chebanenko, and I am not using pretty much any of that. I think it's a very good repertoire, and it has aggressive tendencies. But my repertoire is going to have a lot of overlap. So if you liked our London system repertoire that we have for the Palm Beach Chess Channel, I think you'll appreciate this with black. As if you can't see the mirror image and overlap of ideas, you're not a real London system player. So let's go ahead and dive right in a little bit. So the Slav we're going to be recommending is the straight d4, d5, c4, c6. But keep in mind, you need to know the transpositions. So if 1c4, 1c6 is going to get us there to the closest transpositions. Say d4, d5 gets us straight away. And on knight f3, d5. And we'll have some overlap in our other lines with getting to these positions. Then lastly, with one knight f3, same story, different day. If you're a Caro-Kann player, you don't have any problem playing c6. But if you're not, I would recommend playing d5 straight away, where we get these types of positions. And lo and behold, you can get back to Caro-Kann theory against the King's Indian attack if you play this move order.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
And that saves time for the Caro-Kann players out there, which a lot of the time I would recommend pairing the Slav with the Caro-Kann so you can play c6, d5 against everything. So there's that overlap in ideas. So let's get on to some of the main theory here. So first and foremost, this is already a good point to recognize something. When people are doing prep, say knight f3, knight f6, knight c3 is the main move. But one of the most popular ways to play is with an early e3. And most of the books will cover this move order, and it's really an emphasis of, well, bishop g4 and bishop f5 can be played. They're pretty good in this position. And black will spend time learning this theory on playing bishop f5 or bishop g4. So let me come back to move 3, though. Like in the recent repertoire that I just made for d4 players, I recommended playing e3 here. And here's the rationale. There is no bishop f5 or bishop g4. This slight change messes with the world. So knight f6, knight c3, I've move ordered you out of prep. So having one response for both is important. And if we go a6, the best white has, according to theory, is knight f3. And what we're going to notice when we come back here, exact transposition.
Yep.
So it's a honeycomb of variations, but one of the first things you need to know, get your transpositions. So we'll start with this knight c3, where we play b5 and get the space. And on b3, I like bishop g4, natural development, pinning the knight, e6, and we're going to get to a typical position here. And the theory doesn't start really until right here. And if you had this position in a game, this is a critical memory marker.
Okay.
Because a lot of people would look at this and they'd go, okay, my c-pawn's weak. I need to deal with my c-pawn. What's the best way to do it? Queen b6, isn't it? c5.
No. Queen c7.
Queen c7. And what happens if, say, c takes d, and then rook c1, bothering the queen?
Queen b8.
Okay. And then that's basically it.
Okay.
Like, if you can make that evaluation and be like, all right, queen b8, and I'm okay. You would do it in the main game, too.
Okay.
And it's the main move. But here's a critical move. Can you take with the knight, or should you take with the king?
Trick question. My first instinct was definitely to take with the knight here, but I don't see a future for him going anywhere from there.
So this is actually the real memory marker. First is queen c7, but second taken here. If you take with the knight, you actually run into pretty nasty preparation by white, which I believe Grishuk lost a game this way. And after d5, it's really hard to hold everything together. So that's why it's required to take with the king. And according to theory, this position's roughly equal. White can't really get to the black king.
Okay.
So let's continue here in a game between Sokolov and Rustamov from Germany 2003. Notice how black just lifts the queen in order to connect the rooks to challenge on the c-file. But then after e4 was played, white's doing what he can to rip open the position because black's king's in the center. But after queen takes d5, we're never really letting it get going. And I found an improvement over the main game here where black should just take. And it looks like he's starting to get into some trouble, but after king e7, there's no breakthrough. And we're getting out of the jam here. So, is it rook c8? Double checking, because that doesn't make sense to me too.
Right.
My immediate eye, because if rook takes c8, you can actually, and we needed to go a little bit deeper there to see that there's not much of a follow-up here for white.
Okay.
The knight's just bad, I guess. Can't get in. The queen on f1. If you swapped it, I think black would be in some serious trouble, but as it stands, black has an edge here after rook g7, queen e3, and rook c7. And this is just good defensive chess.
Jeez. Okay.
But I can understand why the Grandmaster didn't go into this, and both of us paused because we're like, that doesn't make sense. Just rook takes c8, and he's crashing through. But you have to be able to find these defensive ideas, and if the rook comes off the board here, it's easy to see why black's better.
Bishop, open position.
Bishop in the open position. I'm cutting off the key squares around the king. The white knight doesn't have anywhere to post up.
Endgame, king's in the middle.
Yep, endgame, black's better. So coming back, we have another branch in the e3 system, and that's bishop d3. Back to bishop g4. When we can pin it, we typically want to. And we're getting our normal moves again, and same kind of structure as the previous game. We just swap the move order some.
Okay.
And
there's no b5 in this line.
No b5 in this line.
Okay.
So we get to this super solid structure, and what I wanted you to see in this position is this is something that pops up in the Caro-Kann and the Slav.
Right.
This exact pawn structure. So you should be relatively comfortable here.
Okay.
And I really loved to see this game because you've got a 2650 with white, Alex Linderman, against a 2700 rated player whose name is extremely hard to pronounce, so I'm going to let that one go. But what you'll see is from this position where I think anybody could agree white's better. White's got the bishop pair, semi-open position, etc., etc. And we'll see slowly how black uncoils and makes something out of it. And this is the main thing that I've been wanting you to work on in your game. It's easy to get out of the opening playing solid, simple chess, but it's hard to win in a position like this with black, especially against somebody like Linderman.
Okay.
So he starts off with rook c8. Would you like to give me the bishop? No, just checking. And now it's if I can get a bishop off the board, I'm going to be a lot more comfortable. So queen e7 with the idea of
Bishop to a3,
Yep.
getting rid of the bishop pair.
So what does white do?
Not trade.
Right. So I mean, it's just understanding the themes that both sides want to go for and following right along with the script.
Right.
So rook fd8, we've at least improved our position with black. The knight's on a better square. Our rooks are better prepared for the action on the D and C file, and our bishop on a3, it can easily come back to b4, and
And there is no rush with any pawn strikes. It's just slowly dancing around.
exactly.
Okay.
Because who's better suited if the position opens up?
White.
So you're in no rush here at all.
Okay.
You need to slowly improve.
Okay.
Queen c7. And what does he do? He's waiting. He said, come to me. Because if white rushes with d5, trades, and black's better. So both sides are kind of, just testing each other. And that's what's required in these types of positions. Now, black finally plays b5. And it's clear that black's the higher rated player trying to win because he's choosing to make the change here and take some risk. Back to this. It's like, you want to play h5? No. Queen a7. Putting some pressure on the c-pawn. Finally getting a little bit of play.
This feels like a patient game.
You have to.
Okay.
When you're playing solid chess, this is exactly what you're aiming for. He finally gets c5 in. And it's starting to get a little bit dynamic. c4, we both have passed pawns, but black's passed pawn's looking a lot better than white's. He's being stared at by the knight and the rook on d8. White's starting to speculate some. Now, rook takes. And starting to feel better and better about black's position. We got the extra pawn. Now we just need to not lose. Queen f7. And finally, all of black's pieces get into it and coordinate very well. Hard for white to hold everything together. Where, you see, the sack and the in-between check must have been missed. But overall, this is a good example game to show you. You're going to get solid positions in both the Caro-Kann and the Slav. And even in the London system, you get those positions from time to time with that characteristic pawn structure. If we can go back to emphasize it, where the capture on e4 happened.
Yep.
This picture here, you get this solid structure with black. How often have you been jumping the gun or trying to change something just for the sake of changing things?
c5, always I want to do
Right,
it.
you want to play b5 or c5 immediately, but notice how patient black was with trying to get what he wanted first.
Right.
And from my experience, the lower the rating of the player, the more they want to make changes. So while you're just setting up this solid structure and improving your pieces, white's probably going to jump the gun and try to do something that is ill-advised.
Like f4.
Right. They're going to overpress. So keep that in mind. And that'll cover the E3.
Okay.
And that's easily the second most popular system that you face here. So let's do some chunking, and let's cover another one here. Either Queen C2 or Queen B3 is the same line, because we're going to take in both scenarios. And when he takes back, this was recently recommended, I believe, in a Chessable course or a Grandmaster Repertoire Series course by Boris of Rook. I think it was on Chessable, where he recommended this for white. And guess who's basically got a London system colors reversed? So we're starting it off, simple stuff, things that you've seen before. And once we get here, these are all natural, normal moves. Already, this is the question of what's white's plan, what's black's plan, what should we be doing? Because this is actually critical. It's easy to develop our pieces, hard to come up with a plan. And I like this next move for black quite a lot.
I feel like white is either playing for e4 with some preparation move or b4 with gaining space on the queen side.
Okay. And
Don't think I could stop e4 though.
e4 is definitely a move that he wants to play at some point. Normally they're going to play rook fe1 to accomplish that, or try to. I mean, we can play knight e4 as soon as he goes rook fe1 and try to slow the roll. But like you were saying, b4 is also something minority attack style. And at some point, maybe he prepares it, plays queen b3, something like that. He can get in b5. So can we shut down b4 from happening?
It's a5.
That's the move that happens. It's asking the right questions in the position. So now rook fe1. All right.
Knight e4, as you said.
So those were the two plans that white had. We're reacting defensively, but we're shutting him down. So rook ac1, queen b6. We're actually making our first threat in the game now. Improving our pieces. I want to get off this pin. We're in a cramped position. Happy to trade. we couldn't stop e4 forever. But now, I really like this next move because in order to accomplish e4, white made a concession. His bishop on d2 is loose. His queen on a2 is kind of awkward.
Knight 5, yeah.
Knight e5 is an excellent move that takes the initiative. And takes on c1.
Lots of decision zigs and after exchange.
And basically, we get a position where, black's playing for 2 results.
Yeah.
And I'll just go quickly through the moves to show that there's a lot of chess left to be played in this position. But black is completely safe, shuts down white's attack, and extra rooks help. And that's following a game between two 2,700 FIDE players from 2019. But like I said, queen c2 or queen b3 on move 4 can both be met by d takes c4, and we get a transposition that's pretty clean.
Okay.
Now coming back, the bane of the existence of the Slav player, and this can be done earlier as well, we have c takes d5.
Okay.
And I will say that the reason that I personally quit playing the Slav was I only played 8 games with the Slav in tournament play. I faced the exchange 4 times, and then I faced the Tory attack 2 times. I actually only got to play the Slav in 2 games. And that's very disappointing. When you're playing the Slav, you want to play the Slav. You don't want to play all these sidelines.
Okay.
Which, it's fine. Black is typically going to do very well against these sidelines, but I want to play Slav. So there's not too much you need to know here with black, but if you're playing for a win, there's a certain amount of motif that I want you to take into account.
Okay.
So say, for instance, if he plays bishop g5,
Okay.
what's your first reaction with bishop g5?
Knight e4.
Knight e4, good. Because we're putting the question to the knight. This is, of course, bad because the d-pawn can fall.
Mm-hmm.
So that's good. That's all we really need there.
Okay.
Creating an imbalance. All right, so what about bishop f4? Good place to start here.
Staying in the theme.
So when you open up the database, it's going to be like, all right, bishop f5.
Okay.
And then there's so many games of this. All right, copycat. Copycat. All right. How are you going to beat somebody from this type of position? You just traded away half the game, and it's a symmetrical position still. See what I'm saying?
Yeah. And white does better in symmetrical.
Oh, yeah. So here, we're going to play a6 first of all. Stop any knight b5, bishop b5. We're not in the trading business.
Okay.
After e3, all right, well, you gave me the ability to pin you, so I'm going to go ahead and take that option.
Trading business.
And only now am I going to play bishop d6. You can if you're really trying, because one of those games, it was actually the game where I got enough points to become a USCF master. That was an exchange Slav. And we had something similar to this. And I played bishop e7 and kept as much tension as possible.
Okay.
You can play all you've traded is a single pawn. Mm-hmm. But I like bishop d6 here, and we're going to see the overall plan that was in this game. And after castles, he's looking to occupy c5 or b6. No. And rook fc8. We make the trade. And a5, pressing the overextension over here. And this is a move that could have been played for the longest time. And I probably would have played it earlier so I could get a knight versus bishop.
Yeah, I kind of had a feeling about that one. I was curious.
It's something that but like I said, it could have been played earlier, but it's going to get the point across with this position that we've been able to create an imbalance. Mm-hmm. And people make the exchange Slav out to be extremely difficult to play against. But if you follow the main line in the database with the bishop f5, you're just going to trade everything.
Okay.
But you don't have to. You can keep tension. You can try to play for a win. It's the same thing if you're playing the exchange Caro-Kann. You can choose to keep tension in the position, and black gets aggressively placed pieces, plays against that c-pawn, and we're able to get that pawn, trade down to an ending where the knight is better than the bishop, the outside passer can be intimidating, but it's not going anywhere. And as soon as we get our pieces in line, the knight does work. So it's seeing this type of end game and being comfortable that the knight is better, but you have to know before you get to the position in the game, because as we've seen in some of your games, when you don't know, you won't make the commitment to say take on f3.
Right.
And
now,
wins.
back on move 21.
Yes.
The move g6 by black. This move kind of... I don't know if I would ever play that here because it just feels like it's weakening a lot of the dark squares.
Okay. So I think most people would look and be like, oh, but you're putting the pawns on the same color as the bishop. But in this case, g6 is going to be much stronger than h6 because white has the potential of using the open file. Mm-hmm. We need to blunt that idea to keep our king safe. Mm-hmm. That's more important than any other theme right now because like tactics are always going to trump long-term positional themes. Okay. Because I can have a beautiful pawn structure and get checkmated. Yeah. Like this, but that is a good point there of why to play this and what makes you comfortable. But does he have anything? Does he have a knight or a dark square bishop?
No, only a queen.
So how can he take advantage of those dark squares? That's another theme to notice there.
Okay.
Good question. Let's roll it back, and I believe. And keep in mind, the exchange Slav is typically, you're going to get it from this move order. Mm-hmm. And you don't want to play copycat here. If you play copycat, he can actually do this like e4 type stuff.
I remember a tournament game like that, dropped a pawn.
So knight f6 on the other hand, and we're stopping e4. Normally they just come back to this. I do know there are some lines with this f3 stuff. Mm-hmm. But I even have a video on the Palm Beach Chess YouTube channel. I don't have this prepared a response for black, but it's not overly intimidating. But it's just, you need to be aware of some of these minor sidelines.
Okay, and then queen h4 stuff doesn't work because of the knight on c3.
Right.
Jeez.
Okay. I want to say one of the ways to play against that is basically just go e6, and if he goes e4, knight c6, e5, knight d7, and it's very, very similar to a French defense, colors reversed. Okay. I don't think you're getting rolled off the board in that type of scenario. Okay. So coming right back, we have made it to the actual main line. So we went through all this to get to the actual theory. Okay. So a6. And here we have a few branches for white. First, let's start with the Fianchetto. And I thought about recommending the Catalan Gambit here, but then at the same time, I'm like, why? There are times when you can play bishop f5 and get a colors reverse London, and there's times when you can't. In the next variation that we're going to look at, move 5, you cannot play bishop f5. It's terrible. Okay. In this variation, you very much can. So the first question that you should ask before you ever play bishop f5 when playing the Slav is queen b3 going to be devastating for me? And in this case, the answer is no. And a theme we're going to see moving forward when we see queen b3 in a lot of these variations is this awkward move, rook a7. Mm-hmm. But what we're going to see, very, very London-esque play, and we're getting our picture. And we're going to come back and get something similar by transposition here with an example game. Knight h4, and this is a colors reverse London theme. Do we just play bishop g6 and give him the piece? This is a theme that pops up.
Bishop g4.
Yep.
Bishop back, and then the knights move if they were to hit us again. But I don't know where to put him this time.
So after g4, I don't know necessarily that it is a knight move here. Mm-hmm. Maybe we just do this because we do get the open H file to work with, and he's weakened the king some. Okay. So, but that is a colors reverse theme that you're saying, do I have any sort of discoveries? In this case, there is no dropping back the knight because the knight's already there. Okay. But that shows the London system awareness idea there. Okay. In this case, he plays queen b3, and as we stated before, what do we defend the b-pawn with? 7, yeah. Mm-hmm. And this was one of the things when I was studying these positions, I was looking for the overlap of when a theme happens, can we do a single thing, get away with it all the time, and it be good? Because if you play b5, that weakens too many squares, you can get into trouble.
Okay.
If you play queen c8, you get into trouble.
Okay.
Queen c8, queen c7, these, it works in some variations, in other variations it doesn't. Rook a7, on the other hand, he can easily be brought back over time, but there's nothing white can do to break you right now.
Okay.
So
black is a wait, be patient again.
and you're going to see how patient in one of the upcoming games black has to be with the rook on a7. It's until a rook or two rook pawn endgame until black is able to get it out. But it'll just show you how he can play. So we're going to move forward with this, which we see the theme we were talking about earlier. And b5, rook gets some play. And knight f8 before castling, because where else can that knight go? Important improvement theme in the position.
e6.
Making sure we have no weaknesses. The rook's still doing work. And though he has the bishop pair and he's got a little pull, we can slowly improve our position. Just don't drop pieces. And where's white getting access? It's the thing. Even if he gets to b7, which he didn't, slowly improving. And when he's got the bishop pair, we want to trade the bishop pair off. And finally, what do we get? We get the bishop pair off. He's trying to stop us from playing e5. We're not having it. We want e5 that bad. And this was another game of black really didn't do much. Black went for basic development, not losing any material, and then plays to get white's bishop pair. And then this becomes a long-term finesse game. But at move 100, somehow the game's a draw. But you can see there's a lot of play for both sides in this type of game. And we'll go ahead and call it since we know it's going to be a draw. But you get the point overall. These systems with G3, you can just play a colors reverse London system, and you have nothing to worry about if you remember rook a7 idea. Okay. So let's see an example where we're stopping b5 altogether with a4. You cannot play bishop f5 in this scenario, because in many lines, white's able to play a5 after queen b3 and just completely lock you down, and the rook never gets back into the game if a knight gets to b6. So that's the theme. That's the memory marker for you to be like, okay, a4, he can play a5. There's not going to be any b5, and I'm going to be in deep doo-doo. Okay. So no bishop f5 in this particular position for that reason. Okay. So we go with the tried and true e6. So now, lo and behold, we're back to g3. This is the theme when playing against this. He has created a hole. This is hole. a5. I am making sure something's coming up that's very important. In the Catalan, white wants to play for an e4 break. Okay. By putting my bishop on b4, I am making sure that there's not an e4 break. Second take.
Right.
So now he's got to prepare it hardcore and do this type of stuff, and you've got time to work yourself out in the position.
Okay.
So after e6, bishop g5 is the most natural move. Our friend a5 is back. And this time we want to put the knight on b4. And there's that pawn structure again. The only difference is we've got the better pawn on a5 and the knight on a great square on b4. I like that black took with the g-pawn here to gain a tempo, get an open file, and then to start pressing in the position with e5. Can't take because of the bishop on d3.
And he just castled into...
And he just fixed his only problem piece. It's a very dynamic position. Black is looking to castle queenside here after queen c7. Utilize the open g-file. You got an aggressive position. You're playing for a win with black.
Okay. How about white going a little overboard and playing a5 early?
Okay. So, if he plays a5 straight away, I imagine we can play b6, or, in this case, it's recommending change gears altogether and play c5 and go into a Tarrasch. Because now our knight can go to c6, and that a-pawn is more than likely going to be a liability.
Okay.
So that's a good question.
So like overextension.
And it's starting to feel like a Tarrasch where white played these a-pawn moves, which are just unnecessary.
Okay.
And, yeah. h6 is liked by the computer, but I consider this as one of my first options.
Okay.
I don't know if it's so great to grab the pawn, but it makes white worry about it, definitely.
As Carlson would say, a pawn's a pawn.
It is. Some people have said it's like a finger. I would rather lose a finger. But you get the theme there overall, where we're having to change gears, and you're having to ask what's called for in the position. So that's it with that one.
Okay.
So now the main event with c5, the absolute main line of the Chebanenko Slav, bishop f5. And let's first come back to queen b3. What move do we play to defend the b-pawn?
Rook a7.
Keeps it easy to remember. He was threatening our knight, so why not move it? e6. We have our typical colors reverse London structure, except with the odd rook on a7, but we're not too worried about him right now. e3, bishop e7. And in cramped positions, what do you want to do? Trade. So knight e4 is an idea here. In one example game, we'll see. And this is the example game that I was mentioning earlier, where that rook on a7 stays weird until the end game.
Okay.
And this is from one of my former teammates on the Miami Championship team, Pavel Ilyanov. And knight a4 was played. We're definitely not getting in a b6 break. Where should black be playing in the position?
Kingside?
If we're just moving a bunch of kingside pawns, what's going to be the point? h6, g5, he goes bishop h2.
Oh, sorry, I meant like playing for e5.
e5, that's exactly what we're looking for, yeah. You're looking to slam in the center in order to break up, because when we see this in the Slav, typically that's overextension, and e5 is crying to be played to do that, to break down that overextension. So first he plays knight e4, bishop f6, and then lo and behold, the knight on d7, rook on e8, bishop on f6, they're all eyeing that e5 square, and we make e5 happen.
Okay.
In between moves are nice, and black gets some breathing room for his pieces. He probably could bring the rook back, but using the time that the queen is still pinned to get this favorable imbalance of knight versus bishop, and we're keeping the momentum going. The rook's still hitting the bishop.
Okay.
And see how black subtly outplayed white here.
Yeah. For the London type ideas, was there anything with getting the bishop traded on c7?
Yes, it works in certain positions.
Okay.
So black eventually goes on to win here.
Okay.
But let's see, knight e4. I think this was one of those where it was pertinent. Rook e8, preparing e5. And in those cases that you're thinking about, where you could go queen c8, bishop d8, bishop c7, I think we see it in the absolute main line. But if you can make e5 work with this scheme of development by trading off a knight, you want to trade when you're in, say, this position, because you're cramped and you want to play e5 and your pieces are in the way of each other.
Okay.
Queen c8, bishop d8, bishop c7 could be a bit slow because he can just play knight e5 in the meantime.
Okay.
But if we go knight e4, if he tries to play knight e5, we could very well say f6, and now I'm going to go with that plan to play e5.
Okay.
And there's no stopping me from playing e5.
Okay.
That is the plan. That's what we're going to accomplish.
That's cool.
And so let's come back to...
That was a nice little flow of ideas there.
And that was with the queen b3 lines. Let's look at knight h4.
Okay.
He puts the question to us, and in a lot of positions, the answer is normally bishop g4, but...
We don't have d3 e6 here.
Yep. So bishop g6, and we're not concerned with the double pawns, but if we have the opportunity with a move order to avoid it, we will. And then this is where I believe he plays queen c8, but rook a7 is definitely a move here.
Okay.
And I wish I could have found games that had the permanent structural overlap, but sometimes they're just not there. Takes, and I wanted to emphasize again that this is a solid pawn structure. We're playing against the H and G pawns. He's got the bishop pair, so what do we normally want to do? Get rid of the bishop pair, and then here's that maneuver. He played e4, he's going to play e5. Black actually goes g5 to fully secure the structure. Finally, bishop c7. And now, since we played g5, the knight can reroute to g6, and it's looking at the f4 and h4 squares.
Okay.
So we can't always get what we want, but I chose this in particular game because it shows the plan of trying to get rid of the bishop pair, but we don't get exactly what we want. But g5 is that nice positional move. We have a pair of knights. Let's work with a pair of knights. And he just slowly improves his pieces because they were a bit awkward, looking for a potential break.
Kind of feels like a Caro-Kann.
Yep. And it should, because same structure. And then finally we get back to the plan that we see time and time again. He's got the bishop pair. I don't want him to have the bishop pair. Queen d8. And slow playing it to make sure everything is safe. And finally, it's like move 30. Black is starting to get some development. But that's how these cramped positions are. You've got to be comfortable with the long term of just, I'm slowly improving and dancing the dance. And that's the game sometimes. And Black actually goes on to win this position of being cramped the entire game, but it's a game of resilience as well. That I imagine this is some kind of time scramble situation at this point, but I'm curious to see the breakthrough because I don't remember. He finally gets in that way.
Jeez.
And it falls apart. So yeah, this is the mindset that you have to have when you're playing slow, solid, closed positions, that I've got to wait for my counter shot. It's not, if you have the mentality of I'm being suffocated the entire game, you're going to lose games like this. But notice, it was like move 70 before Black actually got legitimate counterplay, and it was in the end game. And you got to be patient and wait for that opportunity sometimes. Okay. So like I said, I chose a lot of these games for reasons of resilience and otherwise, or emphasizing key plans. And this is the final game. And got, if h3, we will get a direct transposition here to our rook a7 lines, and we're back to that solid stuff. And if e3, bishop g6. So he has completely shut us down on the queen side. We're not ever looking to play b6 or a5 or anything like that because he's going to crash through.
Okay.
So where's our plan, as it has been in the other positions?
e5.
We want to play for e5, so he starts off with rook e8. Now, what was the purpose of knight d2?
To prepare e4?
Not necessarily to prepare e4, but to stop your knight from going to e4, because it'll change the structure and become a target.
Okay.
So notice how in some of the other variations, you were able to play knight e4, then bishop f6, and then e5. This is a prophylactic move to slow down that plan. So we need to find an alternate plan here. So how else can we get the bishop to attack e5 to try to make headway to play e5?
The
bishop d8 to c7 plan. So we move the queen to c8 here, and I remember analyzing this, and I wanted to make it work immediately, but Black can get some counterplay and get some breathing room with b6. b5 locks it up. Now there's no other option. Now bishop d8. f4. Back at the ideas of trying to stop our plan. We have one plan in the position. So we've got to get breathing room. We've got to do something. That knight on f6 must go. We either are looking in the future for f6 or f5 to lock it up or to try to break it open. So knight e4, it must be played now.
You can't have everything.
If bishop f2, f5, and I'm looking now at ideas of king h8, rook g8, and g5.
Mm-hmm.
The position is locked. We're only going to play in the area that we can. And after g4, we play g6. It's a solid game both sides.
Okay.
And after bishop e4, the main game actually went knight takes e4 and f5. And we're already getting our breathing room that we've been seeking.
That was helpful.
And bishop c7 is going to be the follow-up, and how is he going to preserve his b?
Yep.
So white takes drastic measures here in order to try to change the position, but black calculates that he can get away with this, which he does, and goes on to win this position. Rook and pawn endgames. Not all of them are drawn, especially not this one when you've got two connected passers on the E and D file. So overall, Chebanenko Slav, we have a few different variations that we talked about today, being from transposition c4, c6, or knight f3, d5. We covered why against the early e3. We're going for this move order versus a bishop f5 or bishop g4 line.
Mm-hmm.
We covered when facing the Slav, we want to be able to maintain tension. That's why we like this a6 move, followed by bishop g4. And you have the option to play bishop e7 or d6 to not trade if you're really trying to win. Then we started getting into more mainline theory, like with queen c2 or queen b3, the memory marker is to take and get this solid position as we've seen. And e3, secondary line to the main line. a6 again, where we're comfortable. If we can pin, we do pin. We talked in depth about this structure, playing solidly. Don't be too aggressive or too in a hurry to make changes. You're solid. Let white prove his first move advantage. Let him try. Knight c3 with our main lines, where we covered if a4, it's the only line where we do not play bishop f5 because we're worried about a5, queen b3, and the clamp.
And the knight on b6, yeah.
So a5 is that critical move to play against a4, so we're getting that key square to use, and we saw that in both variations. It's the bishop on b4 to pin the knight to stop the e4 break, because we can choose the right moment to capture. Then finally, if he plays a5 himself, you swap gears and do the Tarrasch style of play, where the a-pawn can become weak. And finally, we've got c5 with the main lines, where the queen b3 stuff was met almost universally by rook a7. We did have one line where that wasn't the case, but I can't remember why it didn't work there, to be completely honest. But I did all this analysis in one sitting, and I don't play this line, so forgive me. But I showed two different examples here with either rook e8 or knight e4, and both of them really exemplify what we're playing for when we get this position, which is the e5 break. That is the plan in every position. It's universal.
Okay.
You've got to get your counterplay because they've played c5. That shows we have to play for the e5 break. So we get this knight e4 followed by bishop f6 plan, where we try to get in e5, and that's exactly what we're playing for across these positions. So hopefully this is beneficial to Matt for his upcoming tournament, and hopefully you guys enjoyed it and pairs well with your London system stuff that we already have on the channel. This was probably one of our longer videos, but if you like this lesson, please show the support by giving us a little like and a sub. Doesn't cost you anything, and I would sincerely appreciate it. We're doing what we can to grow the channel, and slowly but steady, it's getting bigger, and I'm very happy with the type of content we're making lately. Do you have anything to add, Matt?
Not really. It's just great to get back to over the board chess and tournament play again. It's when you have a rough loss, but it can definitely ignite a fire under your butt to all right, time to start training harder.
Absolutely.
So.
All right, that'll do it for this one. Thanks.